Earth and Mars have many similarities. Both planets have polar ice caps, seasons, a similar rotation period that results in roughly 24-hour days, rocky surfaces, and volcanoes. In fact, Olympus Mons, a volcano on Mars, is the tallest planetary mountain in the solar system. The first rover to land on Mars was Sojourner in 1997. Ever since, the rovers have been exploring the surface of Mars, analyzing the rocks and the atmosphere. NASA is aiming for a landing on Mars in the 2030s. However, this raises a question. Is it possible to build a city on Mars by 2060? Firstly, I would like to define a city as a self-sufficient settlement that has at least 1,000 people. We will have to investigate the spacecraft, personnel, and resources needed to start a settlement on Mars. Currently, there are 3 types of spacecraft that could be used to send people to Mars: the SpaceX Starship, the NASA Orion spacecraft, and Deep Space Transport. SpaceX is developing the Starship, which would be able to transport up to 100 people to Earth's orbit, the Moon, Mars, and beyond. SpaceX is planning to launch the first uncrewed Starship to Mars in 2026 to gather important data. If it's successful, they're planning to launch the first crewed missions to Mars in the early 2030s. The NASA Orion spacecraft, built by Lockheed Martin, is an important part of NASA's Artemis program, which hopes to allow humans to explore the moon again and eventually settle on Mars. Lastly, NASA's Human Exploration of Mars Science Analysis Group would potentially use a deep space habitat module for additional living space during the journey. On average, Mars is 140 million miles from the Earth. It is estimated that it would take this SpaceX Starship around 6 to 9 months of travel between Earth and Mars. Globally, the average adult eats around 1.5 to 2 kilograms of food per day. If we assume that 100 people are on the Starship, there would need to be around 31.9 to 47.9 metric tons of food just for the journey to Mars. The SpaceX Starship could carry more than 100 metric tons, but a large amount of the storage would be food. Ideally, it would be better if the crew size was reduced to just 25 people so that only 10 metric tons of food would be required for the journey, and the rest of the storage space could be used for extra food supplies when they arrive on Mars, equipment, and materials necessary to build the city. While it is possible to grow plants on the ship, there would be a lack of gravity and the spaces might be too confined for plants to grow efficiently. Next, we will have to examine the best place to build a city on Mars. This location would have access to water ice, sunlight, and minerals. In terms of the environment, it would have to have milder temperatures in the poles, a lower elevated area with a slightly denser atmosphere, and an area with less exposure to radiation. Using these metrics, we can predict that Arcadia Planitia and Deuteronomus Mensae are the ideal places to build a city. Next, we would need to figure out what construction materials are needed and how long it would take to build a city. Let's assume that a crew of 25 people land on Mars in the year 2040. The first step would be to build a central base where the crew would initially live. In order to build a hospitable city on Mars, they would need to install a glass dome to protect themselves because of the extreme temperatures and radiation. Basic materials for making glass, like silicon dioxide, are found on Mars, but creating a large glass dome might be a challenge. After building a glass dome, they should start building a farm to grow enough food to sustain themselves. Once the farm has been completed and plants successfully grow, another Starship could be sent to Mars. This time, there could be more people on the mission, but there would have to be enough space for additional resources and equipment. Meanwhile, the crew on Mars could start building homes and shelters that are outside of the central base. They could start paving roads and construct buildings for the city. An important thing to note is that Mars's gravity is about 38% of Earth's gravity, which means that people can jump higher on Mars. An important factor in determining if the city will succeed is how diverse the skill set of the people are. For example, if most of the city consists of scientists who lack engineering skills, it would be difficult to develop buildings with good infrastructure. Most of the city's inhabitants would have to do more than one job, since maintaining a city on Mars requires a lot of attention and hard work. In terms of its resources, the city can have access to water by extracting water ice deposits and purifying them to make them drinkable and usable for agriculture. Next, humans could develop a technology to convert Martian air, which is mostly carbon dioxide, to breathable oxygen. Lastly, we would need to find resources for generating solar or nuclear energy, which would be needed to power the city. In conclusion, while it is hard to predict if humans will be able to build a city with more than 1,000 people by 2060, we can safely assume that there would be at least a human settlement on Mars by 2060. We would also need to analyze the conditions, resources, and equipment that are necessary for building such a city. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting on this video to give me feedback. Thank you for watching.